Welcome, everybody. This is Doug McCall, coordinator of the Global Network of Deans of Education. Pleased to be welcoming you to this session on rebuilding, renewing, and transforming school systems. And I'm pleased to be welcoming our panel, which will be making a series of remarks prior to opening it up to a pretty roundtable style discussion of the issue of changing school systems and school and other systems. So our session is described in the slide in front of you. It's the session description that's been circulated. We're going to use the joint statement that's been developed by a number of educator organizations as a backdrop to the remarks made by our panel. And then we'll have an open discussion of school system change, school and other system change as a way of starting our conversation. I'm really pleased to note that this is the first time, in at least my knowledge, that a number of educator organizations have got together like this to prepare remarks and a statement for at the global level. So I'm really pleased. We'll begin our session with Irma Eloff, who is chair of the Global Network of Deans of Education and a professor at the University of Pretoria. We have, and also with affiliation to the University of Innsbruck. We have Amy Niloms from ASCD, who'll be focusing on the whole child. Kevin Cardell, who is president of the Canadian Association of School System Administrators, will talk about working with and within cultures and context. Peter Kent, president of the International Confederation of Principals, talking about resilience and realities. Ann Levitt, director of leadership programs at the American School Superintendents Association on systems change. And then once we open it up, I'm going to ask other members of the group of educators to comment as well based on the conversations we've had in developing the statement. So Irma, I'm going to pass it over to you, and thanks for participating.
Thank you very much, Doug. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. This is the joy of a conversation such as this one, is that it literally spans the globe. You know, we live in a world where we all know that really good things happen when people start talking to one another. And when we sit down, get in the same room, whether it's an in-person room or a virtual room like we did with this current process, the collective wisdom of everyone in the room serves the purpose of finding more innovative solutions to the challenges that we face as humanity. I was trying to think about when this process started, and I think Doug can probably confirm or deny this, but I think it's more or less 2 years that we've had these ongoing conversations about renewing, rebuilding, and transforming education, schooling systems, and education systems around the world. It is something that is close to our hearts for all of us in the room here, and also for everyone who has been part of this process. We ask ourselves in education a lot about the way forward and about futures of education. But in those conversations, we often neglect to really get to the grassroots level and engage with the practitioners who are on the ground every day working in education. And this is something that I think we have achieved with this ongoing process, which is not static, it's very much a dynamic process, is to get to the representatives and the practitioners themselves. There are several things that's quite different to this process in my mind. The first thing is, from the start, the processes and the discussions extended well beyond national borders of education. Often when we talk about education, we only talk about what's relevant in our own country or in our own national context. And from the start, the discussions were lively and it was global in nature. That was, for me, one of the first things that stood out. A second thing that stood out is that I think it extended way beyond ministries of education in terms of its relevance at the moment, but then also going into the future, because we need various ministries, not only education ministries, to be a part of this discussion. The wisdom, some days we were in these discussions and I was scrolling down the bottom of my screen looking at the people who were contributing to the discussion. And there were days where I could literally count several centuries of experience if you added all of it up in terms of what people were bringing to the discussions. And for that, I've had huge appreciation. In the joint statement, there are, I think, some really, really good pools of wisdom. One of them is the need for continuous improvement in our education systems, but perhaps taking the incrementalist approach in doing that. So I look forward to what we will hear this evening or this afternoon or this morning also. And I also even more look forward to what everyone else who will be joining this conversation going forward will also contribute to this lively and I would say critical discussion for the future of our world. Thank you very much, Doug.
Thank you. And I'm just showing a slide of some of the background about the statement and its relevance to other ongoing things. We developed the statement in response to the UN Transforming Education Summit, but there are a number of global initiatives that it continues to be relevant to, and they're listed there, and the slides will be posted on the website, and we'll be able to click on those to follow them through. As Irma said, it's more about the how, about the steps needed to get this done. As employees, we all worry about the practicalities of getting things done. And so it's really important that we think about those steps. And I'll go to the next slide and welcome Amy to make her remarks.
Greetings, everyone. I bring you greetings from ASCD plus ITSE because we have merged. And we believe that the transformation of education requires us to prioritize the needs of the whole child. This involves acknowledging that the way we were taught in the past is no longer effective. The joint statement highlights the importance of schools collaborating with other sectors to address the needs of every child, particularly those who are marginalized. This means providing coordinated support services and essential physical resources to ensure that they are healthy, safe, engaged, supported, and challenged. Research has shown that students thrive academically and socially when their basic needs are met. ASCD, as the architects of the whole child framework, with its 5 tenets of healthy, safe, engaged, supported, and challenged, align with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which emphasizes the importance of fulfilling a person's basic needs to promote their psychological and mental safety. To reform education, we need to put the whole child at the center of our efforts. This means prioritizing children's psychological and mental safety and fostering healthy relationships with caring adults. When students feel that their educators care about them, they are more likely to feel engaged and connected to their academic success. Students should be given a voice in their education. They should be able to provide input on what, how, where, and when they learn. And I take this statement from my 12-year-old. She often tells me to listen with my body language, as well as my heart, as well as with my ears. We have to truly listen to our children. We should ask them what they need to be successful and act on some of the things that they tell us. We should not be afraid of technology. Instead, we should embrace it and teach children how to use it safely. We should also remember that jobs in the future will require proficiency in technological expertise. Embracing the whole child framework requires a transformative change process that involves the entire school community, including students, teachers, administrators, and staff. This will help support the mental health of students and educators and promote long-term development and student success. And just on the slide, I just have that statement about the whole child. And this next slide looks at our whole child framework, which also focuses on the whole child as well as the whole educator, because again, the educators have to be whole if they are going to be able to actually teach our children. So we look at our tenets as well as the anchors that go around our tenets, that foster that relationship building, as well as the additional supports that the educators will be able to help provide to our students.
Great. Thank you, Amy. That's a good start. And just before, as we leave that, the whole child is really kind of the center of the statement. It really is, as it should be, student-centered education, of course. But it kind of branches out to all of the key principles in the statement.
Correct.
Offering a broad learning set of learning opportunities and balancing out the different goals of education. It really is a good starting point to think about this. Ken, I'm not sure if Kevin's arrived yet. I don't see him. Could I impose on you to just talk a little bit about the work that your association has done in trying to connect school systems to their cultural roots in terms of the Indigenous and other cultures that you need to work with? I know you've done a lot of work in that area. And if you want to make a quick comment on that.
So no trouble. We have a strong focus on the Truth and Reconciliation Foundation for the work that we're doing. We have a long way to go here in Canada, but we're making good strides in engaging with our Indigenous communities and respecting their way of knowing, which is a different approach than what you might consider to be traditional education. So we have engaged with key speakers at our conferences who come to share their wisdom with us. The theme from last year was we want allies in the non-Indigenous community. So they're looking to us for support. We're happy to share that support out with them. And in everything we attempt to do, we try to include an Indigenous lens to our work. And we believe that by doing so, we will be able to engage with those communities more successfully. If we start from where they are, rather than impose where we are, good things can happen for them. It's a long road to decolonize the education systems in Canada, but we are trying to work along that path. It's a slow path because our colonial approach to education has been in place for centuries, but this whole notion of the whole child certainly is a good foundation for our work with our Indigenous communities, Doug.
Great, thank you, Ken. And just to sort of elaborate on that, in my work, especially at the national and global levels, I find there's a lot of people doing really good work on programs, which they're very proud of and they want to take into the different countries or jurisdictions or communities. And it often becomes about the program rather than the community or the context. And in my view, I think we need to take more time to really understand the context in which we're working. Now, it's obvious to see as you go to different countries or different types of countries, but it's also, I think, very important that we really look and understand our context and the needs of children thoroughly before trying to reform it. And that's, I've been pleased to see some statements from some jurisdictions where they've tried to do that, to really pick up on the features of the culture, their community, their geography, their system, their learning pedagogy, and so on, and trying to incorporate that into a mission statement in the priorities for the school systems. And so that's the kind of area I think we need to learn more about. And starting with Indigenous communities is again a good starting point to work with. Peter, can you take us into resilience and realities, please?
Yeah, sure, Doug. Good to be with you, everybody. I'm from the International Confederation of Principals, and it's an organization that's got very broad membership across 5 different continents. And sometimes people say to me, "Oh, you must notice the difference between different systems, different parts of the world." Well, actually, what often strikes me is not the differences. I'm much more struck by the similarities. And 2 particular similarities I want to highlight for a moment or two. The first is the similarities in the impact of the pandemic and the lockdown and the interruption to schooling has had upon young people across the world. And that this has had an impact upon their social and emotional development. It relates to what Amy and Ken have already been talking about in terms of the whole child. I think to some extent, we've yet to fully understand the impact of that COVID lockdown and everything that it did. Perhaps we will only fully understand it over a series of years. It's like there's a series of earth tremors that have gone out that we're only beginning to fully recover from. But a particular thing I wanted to highlight is the impact that this has had upon those who care for the whole child, those involved in the professional caring roles, whether it's teachers, leaders, counsellors, psychologists, nurses, support staff, and many others working within school contexts. And that it's really had a profound impact, I suppose, upon the channels of qualified, high-quality professionals. Certainly in the area I particularly work closely with, which involves hearing from across the world about people's experience of working with teachers and particularly with school leaders. There's a number of our colleagues across Europe and Africa and the Americas and Australasia and so on who are saying, look, there's a real shortage of, for example, teachers who want to come into the profession, but also a real shortage of school leaders. And it's gone in a couple of directions. It's both experienced colleagues who've been in the system for some time, who COVID and the pandemic and the lockdown gave them an opportunity to reflect. And they've come back and they've said, you know what, if this is the job and what it involves, I'm not sure I want to go on with it. And it's also those who might be taking the next steps, whereas it's stepping into teaching or into these other roles or stepping into school leadership, who are saying, well, I've seen the effect it has upon others, and I'm not sure I really want to take this on myself. So there is a real challenge and a real need for distributed leadership, for long-term development programs, for ways to support those who are going to work alongside young people, those who are going to provide that whole child education, so that the continuing supply of high-quality colleagues going into these caring professional roles in schools is not disrupted. It's not something that can be taken for granted. I was at a conference just last week where I was hearing even trying to find substitute teachers of sufficient quantity and quality was proving an incredible challenge. And it's part of what we feel as a group needs to be carefully thought through so that there is a planned response and a planned program going forward to support those who are providing this whole child care and this whole child framework.
Thank you, Peter. And that's a good sobering note. And in the Deans of Education group, as we've met by conference call several times, and the shortage of teachers coming into the profession is really scary. And I think it's reflective of other caring professions. Our daughter is a nurse, and she tells us about how many have just taken a step away from their commitment to work. I mean, they're all committed to professionalism, but it's the nature of the caring professions has really changed, or the whole context has changed, and it's going to permeate throughout all of our professional work. I'll turn to Anne from the American Association of School Administrators, and Anne's going to talk about ASA did a really good job a couple of years ago on doing a commission on education. If you wanted to read a really good report, go to their website and find it, because it does provide the process, as we refer to the statement, talk about different processes and understanding how significant the process must be if it's to be successful to reform systems. So, Anne, if you could take it into your remarks, and then we'll turn to others. I see there are others from our group that have joined us, but Anne, please.
Good morning. Thank you so much, Doug. I appreciate the opportunity. It's my honor and pleasure to speak with you and our colleagues this morning. We're all involved in the same work. And we represent more than 10,000 school system leaders across the United States and its territories. And I'm pleased to serve as the Assistant Executive Director of the Learning Network, which is primarily the professional development arm of the American School Superintendents Association. Dave Schuler is our Executive Director, and Dave and I were very fortunate to be a part of that emerging work you referenced, the Commission's report, which was issued right at the height of the pandemic. And at that time, we took the opportunity to really bring together organizations and leaders in education to identify very much what we're talking about today, those critical pieces that are needed for school district reform. We're looking, of course, at culture, where the whole learner is recognized and there's a focus on the whole learner. No learner is marginalized, and the work is primarily future-driven. We're looking, of course, at social, emotional, and cognitive growth, as well as marshaling the resources that we know are necessary for children to grow and develop. And clearly, our focus at that time was also, how do we transform districts so that we are better prepared for the future? I'd like to take this opportunity to thank my colleagues for sharing in this joint statement regarding the processes and the guiding principles for rebuilding and transforming school districts while we are indeed still recovering from the effects of the global pandemic. If you think we're not, just go into any retail store and you will see all around us the impacts of the pandemic still lingering with us. But with crisis comes opportunity. So we share this in this statement to reinforce, reiterate, and renew our commitment to engage all who have the best interests of our children at the center of their work. We are compelled as an organization and as a collective to offer the following strong, comprehensive recommendations that come from our colleagues directly at this time in terms of transforming educational systems that address the various aspects of a student's well-being. We think it's important at this time to really take the bars and implement a holistic curriculum. We've been driven so much across the world with test scores, recognizing that teachers are responding in that way. We think it's time now to develop a curriculum that incorporates academic, social, and physical education, that we're thinking also about emotional growth, and we're including subjects like mindfulness, character development, and life skills, along with the traditional academic subjects. We don't want it to be lost that we are now experiencing a mental health crisis. We're recognizing that. I think we've known it. The pandemic gives us an opportunity to address it. So we need to make sure that we are providing strong mental health support. And that is something that's very difficult for school districts and school systems. In fact, I would say that as a global community, we've not given enough attention to mental health. So we need to establish partnerships with our mental health professionals so that counseling is readily available and the support systems are there for our students. But as Amy said, we also have to remember that we need to train our teachers to recognize signs of distress and provide appropriate assistance for not only our students, but also for our staff. Of course, we need to enhance our family engagement. At the height of the pandemic, we probably had better parent engagement than we had at any other time in our history. We need to make sure that we continue to do that, organizing workshops and recognizing families as whole people too. They can't support the children if they aren't supported. We definitely want to make sure that in this age of technology and apps for absolutely everything, that we are promoting physical health and wellness. We must continue not to be so focused on test scores that we are not encouraging physical activity through sports programs and promoting healthy lifestyle habits. We also must continue to foster a positive and inclusive school culture. Cultures must be inclusive and supportive environments where students feel safe, valued, and respected. We must also do that for our staff. we must make sure that they understand that we accept them, we promote diversity, and we celebrate student achievements and staff achievements so that we can have that positive school culture. Professional development must continue for all segments of our community. We cannot forget to collaborate with community organizations. We must continue to collaborate with our educational organizations because we're all in the middle of this work together. And certainly utilizing data-driven decision-making is what's important. Now we have the opportunity to look at a more diverse picture of data, not just test scores, but other indicators of healthy living, healthy communities, healthy students. And then, of course, our responsibility as an organization, as for you, my colleagues, is to advocate for policy changes. We must continue to collaborate with our local and state policymakers to advocate for policies that prioritize the needs of the whole child, including increased funding for education, mental health services, and other supportive resources. It's been my pleasure to bring you my response or our response to this statement, and I'm pleased to join in today to talk about our position. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Anne. And Anne, I'd have to say, when we were watching the Transforming Education Summit, which essentially asked countries to look at transforming their systems and please report back in about 8 months, it was kind of scary. And many countries did try to respond to that request with some very good work, but it really requires the depth of planning and consultations that the kind of work that you did in your association in that commission. And so the statement does have a number of steps, which I think still needs to be elaborated and described and discussed in terms of how to do a commission properly, how to gather data on children and youth, and so on, that are really substantive things that needs to be done as we look at reforming systems. I see a couple of other members of the group have joined us. So Gracia from the International School Nurses Association, and Martin from Education International, and Carolyn from ASCD/ISTE has also joined us. So Gracia from the International School Nurses Association, would you want to comment about the statement and about the role that caring professionals such as school nurses play in school systems and working with students?
Hello,
Yeah, I can hear you. Yep.
I want to speak a moment.
Yes, please.
You can see me?
Yes.
Sorry for my bad English, but I want to speak a lot about the representation of nurse in the education of the school. I read the documents, and I think that is important, the mention of the work, the role of nursing in the assistance of the class, in the assistance of the community of the school, but it's necessary the paper of the nurse about the education of the health in the school, because it's necessary to prepare to the children for the health in the future, in general. And for this situation, it's important to work about the class, the education about the health. And it's necessary the competence for the students about the care, about the education in general. And it's important the assistant in the class, in the school, because there are a lot of children with the necessity, special necessity, then you cannot go to the school. It's necessary reduce the absenteeism in the class, in the school, and the nurse have importance with this situation. Okay, and ISNA have a representation about the countries, English, French, Spanish, and other countries, and work for this situation, for the representation, the nurse in the school, around the school, and for guarantee the assistance for the children and adolescents in the health. Do you understand?
Yes.
It's complicated for me to speak in English. For me, it's better in Spanish or French, but I don't have at this moment my secretary. Normally, she have here. She contact with the emails. But if you have any question about the job, the ISNA school, you can contact with me or speak. And another thing, the next years in March, there are the second Symposium International in English, Spanish, and French for the competence the nurses at the school, and about the importance the education at the school. Everybody here can to participate. It is important to participate because when finish the symposium, there are a positionment about the education of health and the assistance and care at the school for all the school around the world. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very good. And with regard to the translation of the system, of the statement rather, the website we have on does have an automatic translation aspect to it. If you click on if you go to the website, there's an item that's a Google translation device that does create the page. But we do have plans to translate the statement into Spanish and French, which are the English, Spanish, and French, which are often used as the languages, and we'll do that and have those print copies available, PDF copies available as well for easy circulation as an attachment to an email. But I don't want to leave without talking about the School Nurses Association as part of, well, not as part of this process, but in parallel to this process. They have a really excellent statement on the role of school nurses in schools, which they just published. It's linked on the website, and I would recommend it highly to you. And the two other associations who could not be here today, the Counselors Association, Bill, who has been very active in the group, is going through some health problems and was not able to join us, but they have a really good set of statements on their role. And the School Psychologists Association has also done some really good work, and there's also linked in their page on the website as well. So I encourage you to look at the different roles that caring professions have with and within school systems as being a really an important part of the system. In fact, I've had a conversation, Irma and I have had a conversation with the International Union for Health Promotion Education, and we did add on the connection to the School Nurses Association and the statement that you've done as a way of showing how hopefully the statement does get down to practical and practice-based discussions as well. So thank you again, Gracia. They're going to ask Martin and Carolyn to, sorry, go ahead. If not, I'll ask Martin and Carolyn from ASCD to maybe perhaps add a few remarks. Martin, as a member of the group, has been very active in helping us develop the statement. We're still, and I'm smiling as I say this, they're still hoping that they'll be able to endorse the statement formally. EI is probably the biggest organization in our group, and it's more complicated to get approvals of endorsing the statement. So we're still hoping that will happen. But nevertheless, Martin is always a great contributor to any discussion. And so, Martin, please go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Doug. I think it's really important work and a very important coalition that you've pulled together here. And I appreciate the way that you've platformed off the Transforming Education Summit. We're also at a situation sort of mid-SDG cycle where we should be looking and thinking about the way we might influence the next round of indicators that are going to be developed by UNESCO. And I do think it's an appropriate audience for this work. I think that in terms of how we respond to education now, as some of you know, I also do quite a lot of work with OECD. This is an issue that comes up regularly and often with them. And I think they've worked quite hard to fill out their vision of the child into one that's more holistic, but there is further that they need to go. And I think UNESCO are aware of the importance of a whole child approach. And I think you, Doug, are aware, as is the group, of the importance of a whole school approach. So unless we line up the whole child with the whole school, with the whole teacher, and do this within a context of well-being, we're going to miss the boat. And I think you've been quite clear about the importance of well-being and the symbiotic relationship between teacher and student. But the teacher doesn't exist in isolation either. And that's why this coalition is so important, because you've been able to position the teacher, the school counselors, the teacher educators, and everybody who's operating around that school system in a way which gives us responsibility and a part to play. I think that you've created an environment that is accessible and workable for both child and adult in this situation. And I think it's important that we remember that as society becomes more and more pressured, and we end up in a situation where we have a world that is at the current time quite sick, that in order to make it well, we need to have a change of emphasis and a change of focus. And I think this statement provides an opportunity to do that. So we've appreciated your partnership and your involvement, and we'll see where we end up with the EI approval. So I think you're doing your best with that one, Doug. And I think that everybody really is singing the same song. And I do think that getting the nurses and other partners involved as well is really helpful, because we know that in any school, if you're going to have a school as a hub, it's got to have doctors, it's got to have nurses, it's got to have dentists, it's got to have counselors, and it's got to have there's resources available to put the community back together again. I hope that's not too Pollyanna of me, but I do think we have the possibility to do that. Thanks, Doug.
Great. Thanks, Martin. And I'm going to, I see Kevin has joined us. And Kevin, I'm hoping that you'll be able to make your remarks. We did go through the other members of the panel. I'm sorry if I mixed you up with time zones. Those of us on the West Coast are complaining about the 6 o'clock start, but we'll give you a chance to say a few words. But just before I leave Martin's comment, and Ken Bain was able to add a little bit about your work on Indigenous communities. But I do want to pick up on Martin's comment about whole school, whole child, and whole community. And Kevin, hopefully we can talk about that in terms of linking up to the whole community. And then I would add another one that came out of the Transforming Education Summit, which is whole government. Often UN agencies don't want to talk too much about their governments because they're the members of those agencies, and they don't want to put their members in hot water. But the whole government, and that was the theme that came out of the Transforming Education Summit, is the need to have a whole government approach to the whole child, and that would strengthen the systems response, systems plural to the response. But Kevin, please add to our discussion by making your remarks on connecting to the community, and then we'll go back to the speakers list. Kevin?
Yeah, thank you. My apologies for the mix-up. From my perspective, if we're going to support the development of young people who are going to have the capacity through critical and creative thinking to really make changes in how we respond to living with our world and the environment, and they need to be well. I mean, that's one of those key pieces. And to be well, schools can't do it all. We have to work within community all the time. This is an Indigenous notion, and certainly in Canada and British Columbia, that you work in community with all the leaders and partners to support the growth of the child. And so that's really important. And the way we look at it is we have something, kids can't learn unless they're ready to learn. And that ready to learn piece means they have to see themselves and their culture as valued in the community. So there's a lot of work that has to be done around making sure that they have dignity of person and that they can see their worth. So you have to work on things at least in our communities, on anti-racism. You have to work on things supporting students with the community to do that, because that's not something that even allies can necessarily do on their own. You have to bring in the community to support that work, to truly understand the experience of young people in your community, and how do we avoid othering them. We have to work with our Indigenous communities. We have local education agreements. We work with them, with each child in the work that they need to do. We make sure that their culture and story is present in our schools, and the history, and is visible, their artwork. And so that helps connect to the community. But again, you need the community to work with you and come into the schools so that those young people see leaders who are them, who look like them, who are part of their culture, community, and family in the schools and represented in the work that we do. We also are in a situation where kids can't learn if they're not fed. So I really liked what I heard Martin saying, is that you need to also bring in health. We bring in the community to make sure. We have a program in British Columbia called Feeding Futures, where we're making sure that kids are fed, so that a hungry child isn't going to learn, but a child that's been fed properly, healthily, has a chance to be a learner and to be successful in school. So those are just some of the examples of bringing the community in together. And then as the kids move through the school system, so there's that ready to learn component, and then they're learning foundational skills as the curriculum is outlined by either a state, or in our case, a province. They get to a place as they're starting to get into that graduation program where they're looking outward, and you need to have student agency throughout this process. And it has to deepen as the students' experience through school continues, to the point where they're in their secondary or program that I call is the transition years, when they're looking at transitioning to careers, the world, and they're getting to apply the ideas that they have through inquiry, through support, and through community partnerships with companies, trades, colleges. We have partnerships with our local college and university where kids can get dual credit for courses that they take in high school, and so that they can get those credits, but it also gives them a chance to experience and paint a future they might not have imagined before. And as a result, they work harder towards making sure they're successful, because they can see a pathway, or a transition pathway, to their future and the dreams that they have, not the dreams we might have had for them as educators, but their own agency takes over, and they're able to select from those choices. And so you need an incredible number of community partners to provide those opportunities. And they do that freely, other than the college and the university, where, of course, we use some of the tuition we get from kids, or the funding we get from the government for kids, to help pay for the tuition at those schools, so that they're getting that joint credit. And I can say as a result, when you work really hard and you make sure you engage the community as partners, it takes all of us. We have a motto in my district called "Together We Learn." When we have all of those partners working with kids from pre-K, we have 53 child cares in our school district that support families working, but children connecting to schools before kindergarten. We work with them around play-based curriculum. And so the students see the school as a central place that they've been at for since prior to kindergarten, when they've been very young. They see it as a positive place. They can see themselves and their culture, feel respected and have dignity. They are learning those key foundational skills. They get to apply them with more and more agency through their schooling years. And eventually they're transitioning with very specific real world experience with the support of the whole community, from our post-secondaries to businesses and entrepreneurial businesses. So, for example, we have over 400 kids in an entrepreneurial business program, because in our community, we have an awful lot of students, jobs that are single employer or small businesses or entrepreneurial. And so our students have an interest in that. They can see it in their community. They connect with those people and they see a future. And the result is quite spectacular in that our graduation rate has moved from a high of 88 in 8 years to 96 at this point. So %. And kids are excited to learn and they can see the reason for the learning. We need to go deeper all the time. We need to connect things to things that matter to students in their agency. We do a lot of work on environmental education. We have more to do in that work as we move forward, in supporting kids to become the leaders of tomorrow so that they can live positively globally and start to really understand how to, with hope. Hope is really critical, and with good mental health, to start to tackle some of these really significant issues that they face and we face as a global society. I hope that helps.
Great. Thank you, Kevin, and strengthen that connection to the community, and with lots of examples from your community in the middle of British Columbia. Caroline, I'm going to ask you to make a couple of comments, and then Caroline from Save the Children, and then Chris, if you wanted to jump in as well. And then after the initial remarks, I'd like to turn to where do we go from here with the statement. I do have a couple of slides on that I'd like to open up for discussion, but Carolyn from ISTE/ASCD, do you wanted to tell us a little bit about how technology can be a vehicle for change?
Great. Thanks so much, Doug, and to everyone. I'm Carolyn Sikora. I'm the Senior Director of the ISTE Standards Programs. And ISTE is the International Society for Technology and Education. And as Amy mentioned, our organization merged at the beginning of 2023. And I think it's a testament to how whole child and curriculum and technology can work together to achieve these same aims. I want to say thank you for the thought leadership that went into this joint statement. Certainly, great remarks about well-being, culturally responsive, inclusive. Whole child is so important. Coming out of the COVID, where there was so much isolation, it exacerbated some of the mental health, well-being issues, and for children and adults. And I think this work is so important. One of the comments, Kevin, thank you, that you mentioned was student agency. And in my work, I work with leaders in primary and secondary school, educators, and in teacher preparation programs. And student agency is so vital in such a way because it provides that choice, that decision making, taking responsibility, self-direction, and those are things that are learned, started early, but really mature over their students' academic careers. And with technology, when I think about technology for learning, which is very different than the technology that many kids come in today with experience using technology for social or other things, but not necessarily for learning, and educators learning using technology for teaching and learning, is that we can build student agency. There is a world at our fingertips in a way that was not the case less than a generation ago. And how can we capitalize and build student skills, student agency, so that, you know, post-secondary, they can learn at any time, anywhere, with anyone, in a world that is really changing so rapidly. So it is really our mission to equip students while they're with us in primary and secondary school, to build those skills that enable them to pursue their interests, measure their progress, collaborate with people that on interesting projects. And I would argue too that, you know, as the world of work changes, as so many institutions change, knowing government or finance or entrepreneurship, you know, by teaching students to be curious, to be creative, to be collaborative, they can access draw on those skills that we build with them to really serve themselves over their lifetime. So just want to say again, thank you so much for the statement. It provides such a strong foundation of being able to learn, that ready to learn because of health, well-being, support, in a 360 way. So thank you so much.
Great. Thank you, Carolyn. Caroline from Save the Children, do you want to, I know Caroline's a regular with our school health sessions with our FRESH partnership, but Caroline, this is new to us as well as to you perhaps, and wanted to add your thoughts.
Well, thank you very much, Doug. I'm not really prepared. So my name is Caroline Hilari. I'm with Save the Children. And currently I am an advisor for a project called Spacia, funded by USAID. And we're looking at school health and nutrition policies in 4 African countries, Malawi, Kenya, Uganda, and Francophone Senegal. And what really strikes me is, first of all, the COVID pandemic has really been quite a disaster, even in countries where the pandemic itself wasn't really so hard hit, but you know, because of the school closures and the kids that dropped out totally and didn't come back after schools came back into practice. And that's really a huge social problem. The second thing that really is very much on the forefront is climate change disasters. So we have all these countries that have now experienced much more cyclones, droughts, wildfires or bushfires and so forth. And basically the gains in infrastructure, particularly around WASH in schools that had been made because of COVID. So, you know, people have gone in and installed hand washing stations and so forth. That has in most places been literally washed away by the climate change disasters. And while there is political commitment to increase funding for schools and for education, but it's just not able to match what's going on in terms of destruction. And to the final point, to what has been talked about here in this round, a lot about mental health. and teaching kids some life skills such as mindfulness and so forth. That is really, I think there has been sort of a misconception that is sort of a secondary problem in very poor countries where children are kept out of school because of malaria or diarrhea or tuberculosis and infectious disease or nutritional deficiencies. But actually what we find is that there is quite a bit of burden of mental health as well, and maybe more in those countries that are still struggling with a lot of the poverty diseases. At the same time, they are experiencing an increase in mental health issues. For example, substance abuse is coming up in our Kenya report. And then, of course, all the stuff that's related to gender-based and sexual violence, which translates into a mental health issue, is also coming up in all the 4 countries. So I'm with you.
Great. Thank you, Caroline. And just to refer to the work that Save the Children has been doing in Africa, there's a project that Caroline's colleagues have been working on. I'm hoping that we can make the connection with them. They have several sample countries they've been working with, and it's integrating education and other sectors. I'm hoping that we can connect that in some way to the statement around using the school as a hub in the future. There's a meeting coming up later this month, and I hope that we can make that connection. Before we go to what's next, Chris Shelton. Chris, are you interested? Do you want to make a quick comment, or just click on your mic and your screen, and if you wanted to say something, that'd be great. Please.
Hi there. I don't have a particular comment to make. I've been kind of listening in intently, and it really has been interesting having that whole child framework on the screen as you've been talking and connecting the different things and how they link to that whole child framework. I'm in the UK, and it's disappointing how far some of those ideas appear from some of the discourses that I'm hearing elsewhere in my professional life. So it's very refreshing. But thank you.
Okay, thanks, Chris. I'm going to move then to refer to one thing and then go on to look at where we're going from here. One piece that's missing in the discussions of school reform or systems change are all the different moving parts in system. And so this very busy slide has some of the, not all of them, some of the elements of school systems, be it the developing a shared vision or having a mission statement or having the mission statement from other ministries, non-education ministries, the idea of having workforce development. You can see the list there, and it's actually, if you break it down further, there are about 20 or 30 concepts that need to be thought about and aligned and made coherent if we're going to have a truly transformative systems change. And that will take years to do in any system, big or small. And so it's one of the things we hope to have made evident as part of the statement. There are pieces of the statement that do refer to that, and the kind of caution of take your time to really work on incremental, continuous improvement strategies rather than large-scale, abrupt change, because they tend to be generate counter forces and then end up being back to status quo or even worse. So these are just some of the different elements of school systems that need to be thought of. And within the Global Network of Deans of Education, we're going to be asking colleagues to write a 1 or 2 pager on each of them and their implications for this work, and to kind of have a way of putting all the pieces together and encouraging countries and states and local communities to think about the different pieces and making sure that they're as aligned as possible. And so I'll leave that with you. The list will be appearing in that paper, and then we'll we'll bring it back to the group. I managed to, where am I here? Oops, where, oh, there we go. So this is the part I wanted to close on, and I'm hoping you can see it easily. It's actions to support the statement and systems change. These are some of the things that we've embarked upon as the group. Just to skim through them quickly, we're integrating and trying to influence the follow-up to the Transforming Education Summit. There are, every country made a national commitment and a statement. And so we're hoping and there are steps being taken to support those processes leading up to another UN conference in 2025. And so we're hoping that we'll be able to use the statement to influence some of those processes as best we can. And that will mean making presentations or perhaps going to using some of our membership connections to approach those countries who are interested in discussions with educators through the statement. We'll obviously be publicizing the statement in terms of newsletters and conferences, webinars. We'll do some journal articles. We're looking at trying to do a special issue of the International Journal for Educational Leadership and Policy. We're hoping that we can do that. We've written to UNESCO, aimed at two parts that I'm not familiar with, and maybe Martin, you can talk about, is there is an ed policy division, and there's also a division on innovation and change. And those are parts that I've not yet interacted with, but I think that might be the angle into UNESCO. They were responsible for the Commission on Education that the UNESCO did. It's a good commission, good piece of work. And then on educational policy. So we'll be in a discussion with them. And Martin, as you said, the OECD work on the Education 2030 is important to try to influence their work. They have a workshop in Romania next week, I think it is. There's several of us on the joint statement group that have made connections to OECD through our own work. They also have a very interesting declaration on education and equity, which is very supportive and very similar to the statement that we've made here. So it's hopefully we can strengthen the connection. OECD is able to influence the more developed or more resource countries directly in terms of their work. There's a World Education Forum of Education Ministers. They have an annual meeting, and there are several education ministers' councils around the world. So we'll try to get on their agendas. I suspect as we make those approaches, we'll be trying to connect to their agenda in terms of the things that they're going to discuss at the next meeting, rather than coming with just our statement. And again, using the statement as a backdrop. Discussions with UN agencies, of course. And then here, the subpoints there, potential projects and so on. We've started some of them. Those of you in the group will recognize our discussions with UNESCO about the session on leadership. So we're going to be doing a series of webinars and a series of summaries by Educator about connecting leadership development with workforce development and professional development, so that it's grounded in a solid home. The Education Commission, their work on the whole of government approach to sustaining intersectoral frameworks is another piece, and so on. You can read as well. And the last little piece, I'll just skim down to that, is we maintain a list of ongoing changes and initiatives, global initiatives that relate to school reform and school system change and other systems change. So that's the kind of actions. I'll open it up for discussion here then about, is that list appropriate? Is there things that we need to think about? Are there things on that list or other things that should be prioritized? Open it up for a general discussion about where we go next in terms of the statement. We are going to be asking people to, organizations and the individuals, to take a look at the statement and consider endorsing it, or even making comments on it, hopefully mostly positive, that we'll take into account as we move forward. And there is a page on the website for that. So opening up for comments. I know it's a long list.
Doug, it's Ken. from CASA, and I thank Kevin for his presentation this morning. I thank all the presenters. Just a comment about Kevin's commitment to context and community. There's been a great success in his school district as a result of the work that he's been doing, and I applaud him and his leadership team for taking on the importance of context and culture, and taking actions that support the students in his school district. The fact that that previous slide had so many pieces to it, it's almost daunting to consider where to start. And as I said in my remarks about decolonization of education and the great work that we need to do our Indigenous communities, that it's a long road, but we have to take small steps to get started. And I appreciate the intersectoral nature of the work that we're doing, and hope that we can, as CASA, school system leaders across Canada, can continue to support the work that needs to be done. But it's finding an entry point that is culturally contextual, and then taking steps from there. Thanks.
Thanks, Ken. Other comments? Gracia?
I can?
Yeah.
Hello. I think that this is very interesting and very important. And this document, the consensus, is represent an advance for the education of the children around the world. And I think that it's important to work a lot about this document. Okay.
Great. Thank you very much, Gracia. Kevin, you have a comment?
Yes, thank you. From a national and then a global perspective, I think this is very ambitious, but it's work that needs to be done. And I think the context really matters. You're going to have to find an entry point. The example I gave is in my community, but there are examples like that across Canada to varying degrees. But when you listen to the challenges that are faced globally, all of those points that we're trying to achieve become really important, because it gives the local education authorities some agency about their entry point. And they're going to need that agency around their entry point, because what makes sense for me in Canada might not make sense, for example, in some parts of Europe or Africa or wherever, depending on the political context, the environmental context, or even how education is funded. And so I think people are going to have to select, and we as a committee need to try and find ways to support. I think it's an ambitious plan. Absolutely support it by connecting people to networks across the globe. I think that's one of the positive things that we can do, so that they can have an entry point to improve their system based on their context within their and with agency, if that makes sense.
Thank you, Kevin. Further comment?
Yeah, I can jump in, Doug.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
I'll be there in Bucharest, so I don't know if you're going, but it's something which may well come up. We'll see how the meeting develops, but that's 3 days over there. That's
Okay,
the OECD 2030 one, Doug.
Yes, yes. So let's make that connection quickly. I'll copy you in on the letter that Irma and I are writing, and I'm not able to make it, but it is a way of maybe starting and making the connection to a couple of individuals and then following up. I think OECD has a lot of potential. That particular session, correct me if I'm wrong, is on AI,
no, it's broader than AI. It's not just AI.
Oh, good. Okay, then let's act quickly to get something started there. It may be too late to actually get on their agenda formally, but maybe let's get a discussion going of how we can influence and maybe have a discussion of some of the ideas in the joint statement in a subsequent meeting.
We should have a chat, Doug. Give us a ring when you've got a minute.
Okay, for sure. Thank you. Amy, please.
Yes, I just wanted to include that we must consider how are we going to get the next group of educators? What are we doing to engage students to ensure that they would even be interested in coming into the education field? And I think that that's something that, again, we're going to really have to take a lot of consideration. And I've said it in my statement that we can't keep doing education the way that we're currently doing it. And I think that's one reason that we're not attracting as many young people going into education right now to consider themselves wanting to become teachers. So again, I think that that's something that we need to even think about in the K-12 sector. How are we working to build that next group of educators?
Okay, and that's obviously something that the Deans of Education are very interested in. Irma, I'll maybe ask you to comment on that and then maybe segue into closing up the session.
Yes, I thank you very much for all the contributions. Well, for me, it's this evening. I agree completely with Amy. We cannot emphasize enough the pipeline of future teachers. And we have them in our schools right this very moment. So what are the kind of working environments that we are creating? Not only in terms of learning environments for our children, but the working environments for the future teachers. So thank you very much, Amy, for raising that. We talk a lot about teacher retention and recruitment, but the recruitment starts on that very first day when they enter formal schooling and how they feel in that moment, and then all the days after that. So it is a very fruitful moment for us to think about schools much more broadly than the individual learning that's taking place on a day-to-day basis. Yeah, so thank you for that. Doug, I don't know if you want to add some conclusionary words.
Just briefly, the slide that is on the screen now is the kinds of things we're planning. And Martin's offered to pick up on one part of that in terms of the OECD connection. That's great. If people have those opportunities in their own work, if they wanted to just contact me to see how we can do that. And it was great. This is a shared leadership model. Please feel free to jump in and take a lead on some event, some conference, some project or something where you think we could use the statement to influence the discussion and then publicize the statement as a backdrop to that particular project or initiative. I think that's the value of the statement, is that it's a fairly coherent set of ideas, practical ideas that need to be pursued one by one, step by step. They add up to a big ideas, but they all need to be step by step incremental change. So anytime any member of the group has an opportunity to bring the statement into the conversation with decision makers or with practitioners or with researchers, please do so.
Thanks to you, Doug, and to Irma for your work on this. It's much appreciated.
Yeah, no, it's enjoyable work. I know Irma's, I don't know what time of night it is for Irma, but she's a very dedicated person to work with. That's great. Further comments before we finish up? If not, I'm going to just turn off the